So, added sugar in your diet. First, we need to discuss the definitions of the vocabulary involved.
So I am going to simplify this. In some countries, the classifications are slightly different. The key is we're looking for the difference between an added sugar or a food that is itself basically a sugar, such as honey and molasses and agave syrup, versus a whole food that has a little bit of naturally occurring sugar. Let's read through this together. So an added sugar is something that is not naturally in the food. It is added during processing. This can be any type of sugar. It can be white sugar, brown sugar, cane sugar, tapioca sugar, beet sugar, corn syrup, honey, molasses, agave. It doesn't matter if there is a special fancy name on the sugar. That is an added sugar. And in the United States, this will be listed on the nutrition label. So understand an added sugar may be disguised as something friendly. Now, a free sugar is slightly different because a free sugar includes the foods such as honey, maple syrup, agave, some of these things that may be used as an added sugar. So really it's kind of the same thing. It just helps you to understand better. Also importantly, certain sources will include some of the unhealthy artificial sweeteners as a free sugar. So for example, the artificial sweeteners that have been proven to be unhealthy and are not recommended by the health governing bodies of a nation would be included as a free sugar. Aspartame is a great example. It is definitely not on the healthy list. I hardly ever even see it in foods, but some places do count that as a free sugar. So total sugar is when you look on the label and you see the added sugar plus whatever was naturally in the food. And then those naturally occurring sugars are basically what was in the food to begin with. This will include milks, the lactose is a sugar. This will include vegetables, fruit, and a lot of whole wheats. So they have naturally occurring sugars. So the take-home point of this complicated list is basically a naturally occurring sugar does not count as an added sugar towards your added sugar goals. Why is added sugar and free sugar so bad, even if it is from a coconut or a date? Why is it so bad is because basically it's just calories, a lot of calories, a lot of a substance that also causes decay on your teeth. So it has no nutrition in it. You really want to focus on nutrient-dense foods to make sure you have a healthy diet. Nutrient-dense food especially includes vegetables and fruit. So if you have a sweet tooth, make sure you have a lot of fresh fruits on hand that you enjoy eating.
What is added sugar? And why are we avoiding it? So, it's very confusing, but really it's better to use the term free sugar because free sugar does not necessarily have to be added, right? So like we all know, well, you may know that added sugar, if you notice on labels now, the US requires that added sugar be listed. So if sugar, whatever form it is added to a recipe or, a packaged food, that has to be listed on the package. So we get that. That's an added sugar. That's kind of simple. But then there's something that's not really an added sugar, but it's still considered a free sugar. So we have free sugar includes added sugars as well as like products that just are sugar. So like sugar itself or honey, maple syrup, something like that. Like date sugar, that's like sugar, right? So It's really confusing. Basically, the US now has laws that they must indicate any added sugar that's put in.
So here's a brief label review. Basically, total sugars include the added sugars and the natural sugars. Added sugars, on the other hand, are only those added in processing, and these are officially the enemy. These are the ones that cause blockage of your microvascular system, basically blindness, basically loss of sensation, especially in patients with chronic diseases such as diabetes, but it affects everyone like this. So adding sugars unnecessarily, not only is it an empty calorie, but it is terrible for your circulation and your health in general. Here you can see on the label there is an added sugar as well as the total sugars. A good point is we don't have to give up added sugar totally, but we want to make sure that it is within a reasonable amount. So watch more to see what is that reasonable amount. Foods with excessive sugar, such as cereals, yogurts, cakes, pies, really truly excessive amounts of sugar should not be included in your diet at all, except on holidays and birthdays, truly. And even then, have a small piece.
What isn't included, and this is where it gets interesting, and this is where you'll see your diet still can be very interesting, healthy, and delicious. So lactose sugar, right? So any type of a dairy product, that sugar, I don't want to say doesn't count. It counts towards your calorie total. It counts towards the amount of like carbs in your diet, but it doesn't count as like a really bad free sugar or added sugar. Also, regular carbs, like if a carb doesn't have added sugar, it's still basically a lot of sugars which make up a carb. This is very confusing, but if you get the gist of it, you'll get the whole point. So carbs have basically not really added sugar, but they have sugars in there. Same thing as milk, right? That we just talked about. That doesn't count as the really bad sugars, like the added sugars. Then you have things like fruit, vegetable. There's a lot of natural sugars in those. That doesn't count either. So really confusing, but the idea is we want to limit those added sugars, basically the processed sugars. We also want to limit like honey and maple syrup and date sugar and things like that, because it's pretty much the same thing, very similar to cane sugar, which is one of the sugars we're avoiding. So the idea here is we're going to have more wholesome foods. If a carb or a sugar is naturally occurring in it, it's not really like the forbidden added sugar. Ideally, you want to cut out all added sugars from your diet, really. Free sugars, also you want to really, really limit a lot. Why? Why is this a problem? Because sugars will cause various issues, multiple issues, from obesity to type 2 diabetes to insulin resistance to metabolic syndrome to just basically a lack of health overall. So that's why we're trying to limit our bad sugars in our diet.
Approximately 20 grams of added sugar should be your limit per day, and that is per the CDC and the NIH. You want to minimize added sugar plus honeys, syrups, and concentrated juices or fruit juices. However, whole fruits can and should be included in the recommended amounts. Health complications that can arise if you eat too many sugars are weight gain, diabetes, high blood pressure, tooth decay, and many, many more things. Metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, overall depression and anxiety. This article talks about some of the health complications. So notice it's not only obesity and type 2 diabetes. Take a look at these other health conditions that too much sugar can cause. It can also affect your microbiome negatively. It can affect your brain circulation negatively. It can cause stroke. It can cause an increase in cholesterol levels. This is all just from too much sugar. Use of this simple framework can guide you. Plus, you have your allotment of 20 grams of added sugar on top of this. Ideally, a Mediterranean-style diet with very minimal meat and sweets, is shown by research to be the most healthy for the human body. This type of a diet will keep cholesterol low, prevent obesity, keep mental function ideal. The list goes
But
on.
we need to understand what sugar is what before we know what to eliminate and what to watch out for and what to simply limit. Look at the labels. A lot of these products, number one ingredient is some type of sugar. So there are a lot of laws and regulations that kind of like cover this area, and it's kind of a difficult market because these foods, there is a calorie requirement,
I found this article that discussed the use of added sugars in baby foods because it was very concerning to me to look at the first ingredient on a lot of the formulas and a lot of the snacks for infants and children. It does turn out that there are laws that do regulate the addition of various sweeteners. But I do see that parents have to be vigilant reading labels and making sure not to include too much added sugar in their child's diet.
When all is said and done, the key is the baby has to get enough nutrients, enough calories, right, to grow and be okay. But I think we're more advanced than that. We can make those calories very nutrient dense and healthy. So long story short, this is one of the reasons why breast milk is ideal. And this is one of the reasons why you do want to look at that label and you do want to see that number one ingredient. What is it? Again, it's actually illegal for them to use certain sugars, but long story short, you want to make sure that, you're not adding unnecessary sugars. This is not just for your calorie total. So it really has to do with the fact that every calorie, especially a child, every calorie that they intake, every calorie that you or I intake should be high quality calorie, meaning we have that unit of energy, plus we have a lot of phytonutrients, micronutrients, things that may not even be necessarily on science's radar as of yet. So basically, it has more than that calorie. There's benefits to it. It's also important to understand, if you read up on the WHO and the CDC, they indicate that if you don't have diabetes, if you don't already have a chronic sugar issue, then really you can eat a good amount of fruit. You can eat a lot of fruit. Really, half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables, but mostly vegetables. So vegetables are a big key because you don't even have to worry about it. There's a slight amount of natural sodium and natural salt in most vegetables, but I'm talking about if you eat a ton of mangoes all the time, right? That's a lot of carbs. That's great if you're running a lot or if you're a triathlete. Yes, you're going to need it. But too much of that can be bad as well. But I will never ever tell anyone to limit their fruit intake. Fruit juice, yes, you want to limit fruit juice. But fruit, honestly, there are people who are fruitarians, meaning that's all they eat is fruit. And some of them do, endurance sports. It's just risky because you need other nutrients, you need proteins, and you get into this. Yeah, you might be really happy all the time, you might be elated all the time, but really it's dangerous, and you probably will end up in the hospital if you're able to maintain it, because it's not a complete diet. So also delineating, for example, dates. Dates are one of my favorite foods, and they're very, very sweet. And when I encourage others to add dates to their diet, sometimes people get kind of taken aback and they're like, oh, that's very high in sugars. These sugars, for real, if you do the research, you'll see that the sugar in a date is good for your glycemic control. It's good for your blood sugar. Obviously, I'm talking about in the normal serving size, not excessive, not only dates, right? So if you add dates to your diet, it is not the same You know, if you have 100 calories worth of dates versus 100 calories worth of Entenmann's donuts, these are totally different things. 100 calories worth of candy versus 100 calories worth of mango. Totally different things, and you need to kind of understand that. So my point was, the WHO and the CDC on their sites indicate if you don't have one of these chronic diseases already that involves sugar metabolism, you don't really have to like stress about carbs and fruits. You do need to add them in the proper proportion to your diet. So you don't want to like overdo it. You want to have room for your protein and your dairy. Really, one of the only things that is very difficult to overdo, it's very hard to go wrong with, is a lot of vegetables, a lot of leafy greens, a lot of red vegetables, orange, yellow, the colors, and then starchy vegetables as well. So really having that variety is crucial. But even that, you know, I have worked with people who ate too many vegetables and they had a GI issue because of it. Their stomach became like just overly, I don't know what the heck happened, but overly full. Plus the fact that there's microorganisms on all of our food, but vegetables are high in certain basically pathogens. In the normal amounts, it probably won't hurt anybody. But if you eat excessive amounts of, for like example, broccoli every day in large amounts, and that's it, you're gonna probably have an issue. So don't go too crazy either way. You want to have a balance, but you want to understand really how terrible sugar is for your person, for you, how terrible sugar is for your health. And part of the actual reason for this on a microscopic scale is that your microvascular system, so your teeny tiny venules, arterioles, capillaries, right? Teeny tiny passages that blood flows through, these really do get clogged with sugar and thickness. Your blood does become syrupy if you are too, consuming sugar too much. Fascinating stuff. So also let's highlight that this doesn't mean that you have to have like a really boring diet or a really, you're not going to have your treats. You're going to have your treats. It's just we're going to be really selective about what treats you have. I always like to point people towards mangoes and dates. They're really, really good. Fruit in general is sweet enough and delicious enough to be a dessert, but you do have to train your body to kind of accept that as a dessert. When I was really strict for a while about veganism and vegetarianism, and I really wasn't adding any like garbage food at all, I had like a really healthy peanut butter jelly sandwich one day with a lot of like one of those healthier jellies with no added sugar. So I had that sandwich and it tasted like so sweet. It tasted like a cake because I was I was raw vegan and I was eating healthy salads with like lemon juice only. I was very strict and I was like really strict on that lifestyle. But what happens is, this is just an example of how your taste changes. So then you have something like a regular old PBJ sandwich and you're like, oh my gosh, that was like a pie or a cake and it was so good. So you have to really like train your body and train your mind to appreciate blueberries, fresh, juicy blueberries that are really clean. It's an amazing dessert and there's really no reason that we should have to go above that. It's more than enough of the sugars and the dessert-like food. But again, the way most people's diets are now, this is an extreme jump that you have to make. These are major changes that you need to work on in your diet. Okay, so also your mood elevation that people say that sugary foods give them, that mood elevation is not real. So it's very fleeting and short-lived, and it actually, it's hard to notice if your diet in general is not that great. But if you get to a place where you have a really good diet and then you have a sugary food, you're actually going to feel more miserable and more tired. So the truth is, it does not give you energy. People call it brain food when they're in college and studying and doing the all-nighters. This is so far from the actual truth that it's really upsetting. and it's important to establish these habits at a young age. So if you have children, really, focus on not including processed foods and added sugars. And on top of that, limiting things like honey or natural sugar, quote unquote natural healthy sugars, because those are not great either. The fruits are pretty healthy, but again, those need to be limited as well. So there's a lot of confusion on sugar, especially new moms with their children who, once they get onto these like cookies and stuff, it's so hard to get them off. It's almost impossible. So really, we want to make sure that we highlight healthy foods that they do like. If they're into raspberries, make sure you have raspberries around a lot. Make sure we have delicious whole grains for the carb and fruit portion of the diet. Make sure overall half that plate is fruits and vegetables. And then, with the bulk of that half being vegetables. So, and it's not easy. Trust me, it is definitely not easy. Sometimes very impractical if you have a busy schedule, if you're on the go a lot. So it's something that needs to be prepped for and fully understood. So, all right, well, hopefully you are able to minimize your sugars today and focus on some healthy snacks.